Hey everyone, Brayden here, coming to you with a Mickey Views special report on a topic that I have not spoken about here on the channel in quite some time. The state takeover of the Reedy Creek Improvement District, now renamed the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. This week, a settlement was reached between Disney and the district, which we are about to get into. Briefly on the recent history that led us to this point, you should recall around this time 2 years ago, the governor of Florida got involved in Reedy Creek. That is the district that oversees Walt Disney World. It's a special district that Disney got set up back in the 60s, which helped with the infrastructure build out, privately subsidizing that, building out all the roads and infrastructure you have in the middle of the Florida swamp, which we now call Walt Disney World. For many decades, Disney has exerted a lot of control over their special district and the board that oversees it. And there are deeper reasons for why the governor of Florida at this particular time wanted to address this and reform this district, things that go beyond the scope of this channel. There was a whole political battle that you might recall between then CEO Bob Chapek over at Disney and Florida's Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis was ramping up for his presidential bid and all of that. So the scuffle culminated in May of 2022 with Florida's governor saying, hey, the state is going to reform Disney's special taxing district, which oversees things like power, roads, infrastructure upkeep, landscaping along the roads, things like building code, the enforcement of it. And essentially DeSantis' argument was that a private corporation shouldn't be allowed to exert such total control over the municipal government that is in charge of regulating it. And therefore, we want to replace the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And this naturally spawned a lot of questions over how do you replace a district with a 9-figure annual budget and over $1 billion in outstanding debt. And also there's lots of existing contracts between the district and other people, and the district sells bonds and all sorts of questions like this. How would this all be resolved? There were concerns that the debt would be inherited by the surrounding counties or the state, which would need to be recouped through new taxes on the citizens. So a good 8 months went by where nothing seemed to be happening until 2023 began, and lawmakers filed House Bill 9B, which detailed how the state takeover of the district would work. No bonds or existing debts or contracts with the district would be directly affected by the legislation. The district would be renamed the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, and most crucially, the big change is that the Board of Supervisors would now consist of 5 members handpicked by the governor of Florida and then confirmed by Florida's state Senate. This bill passed through the State Affairs Committee, the Florida House of Representatives, the Florida Senate, and was signed into law on February 27th, 2023. When things really went nuclear was right as the governor's handpicked board came into effect, and Disney went, not so fast, with their departing board pushing through that famous development agreement just days before the new state-appointed board took over. And this development agreement stripped the new board of virtually all of their powers before they even took their seats. This last-minute development agreement between Reedy Creek and Disney removed the need for Disney to seek approval from the district's board in order to build high-density projects like new parks and hotels. It allowed them alone to dictate the height of buildings. They could go right over the district's head, literally with those, and among other things, allowed Disney to sell or assign development rights however they pleased, making Disney the master developer rather than the district, which previously retained those rights and doled them out to Disney on a periodic basis. And this developer agreement stipulated that it could not be changed by the district's board in the future. You might recall what was so famous about this developer agreement and the restrictive covenants around it, and that was the King Charles Clause Disney invoked in these documents, stating that this declaration shall continue in effect until 21 years after the death of the last survivor of the descendants of King Charles III, King of England, living as of the date of this declaration. Discovering this development agreement after taking office, the newly installed state-appointed board which claimed they wanted to work with Disney from the outset, said that they were forced to adopt an equally adversarial posture to Disney, and they started talking about how their hands were tied for effectively the next 100 years, and therefore they began talking about litigation, taking this contract, this case, to the Supreme Court. And this incident was particularly embarrassing because while the agreement that Disney snuck through was portrayed as having spawned into existence out of the blue the day before the new board took their seats, the outgoing board had actually held multiple public readings and hearings on the developer agreement in the month leading up to the signing of the new law without anyone from the state realizing the ramifications of this till many weeks after the fact. Mind you, to my knowledge, no reporter fully realized the contents of the developer agreement Disney was sneaking through at the public meetings either, so it wasn't just the state that was surprised by this, we all were, but nevertheless, this incited a storm of headlines against the governor, who appeared to have gotten outsmarted by the mouse. And the ensuing media attacks resulted in some very entertaining retaliatory press conferences where DeSantis suggested, among other things, taxing the roads that you take in and out of Disney, and most preposterously, proposing building Reedy Creek State Prison. The next day, I attended a meeting of the board where the district special counsel dug into the last-minute development agreement, which, as it turned out, was rushed through so quickly, there was a case to be made that it didn't follow Reedy Creek's own proper procedures on how a development agreement should be presented and approved. And the new board therefore considered the development agreement null and void, and that was further voided by the state legislature. They voided it as well, signed into the law by the governor on May 5th, 2023. However, since the agreement and restrictive covenants were binding between the district and Disney and had already been enacted, there was an easy case for Disney to make that this contract couldn't be voided by a third party like the state. As a result, Disney sued the CFTOD, and the CFTOD sued Disney. So this meant, in effect, until the lawsuits were carried out, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight Board would really not have total power over Disney, the powers that they would normally have. It was really up in the air. Can they exercise these powers that were restricted by the agreement? They've technically voided it, but it was really in this gray area pending the decisions of the courts. And of course, on Disney's end, unsure of their future relationship with the CFTOD, Disney was not particularly animated to invest in new infrastructure projects during this period, as they could become subject to the new board's whims at any time based on how things shook out in the courts. Disney's returning CEO Bob Iger responded to the stripping of the district from Disney's control in last year's annual shareholder meeting, saying that it was a violation of Disney's First Amendment rights, and they filed a federal lawsuit on that basis. Mind you, that was all around this time last year, and after that, I really stopped covering this for a while, because from then till now, it's really been the very slow wheels of justice turning, setting hearing dates, doing discovery and all this sorts of things. And meanwhile, we've had proponents on each side saying, Disney has a slam dunk here. Disney's going to get Reedy Creek back. And then, of course, proponents of the state saying, the state has a slam dunk here. They have the authority to do this. Disney's making a fool of themselves. And we just sort of had to sit here and wait. It was all down to the lawyers. And if you want to know who profited from this drama this past year, it was the lawyers. That meeting I was at, it was 10% reporters, about 10% district staff, and I'd say it was around 80% lawyers. There were a lot of lawyers in attendance. So personally, I'm not an expert on municipal law or anything like that, so I was waiting for something concrete to report to you guys. Have the courts decided that the new district is legal and the state-appointed board gets all their powers back, or does Disney get their way and regain control of their special district, and it goes back to being Reedy Creek? And that limbo period came to an end a few weeks back, at least somewhat, when Disney's flagship case in this battle, the First Amendment case, the federal case against the district, it was thrown out of federal court, with the judge saying, quote, Disney lacks standing to sue the governor or the secretary, and its claims against the CFTOD defendants fail on the merits, because when a statute is facially constitutional, a plaintiff cannot bring a free speech challenge by claiming that the lawmakers who passed it acted with a constitutionally impermissible purpose. However, and this is interesting, the judge stated that Disney could perhaps pursue, based on the evidence that they saw, an injunction precluding the CFTOD board from exercising its authority, and that would perhaps redress Disney's injury, at least in part. So again, I am not a lawyer, but what I believe this means is that while the judge believes Disney has no basis to go after the governor for using powers he's duly elected to exercise at his discretion, having reviewed Disney's evidence against the state and the district, Disney has alleged enough to show standing to sue the CFTOD defendants. That is, the new board could be subject to further federal litigation, which could be personally damaging for the board members. And Disney appealed this decision in federal court, with the CFTOD being named as the defendant. At the same time, in the state case, Disney filed intent to record videotaped depositions of the entire board of supervisors, the new board, with the chairman of the new board, Martin Garcia, first up on March 22nd. So with all this in mind, the board members, they could be in legal trouble. Now they're going to be deposed on tape. A week prior to when Disney wanted to depose the chairman, he stepped down from the board just days after the district administrator also stepped down. So the reason I wanted to establish some of this history and certain recent developments on this before getting into the settlement details here is because I think these recent developments in particular color this settlement today. Ending the 2-year power struggle and confusing legal battle, at the March 27th meeting of the CFTOD board, the district announced they'd reached a settlement with Disney. Here are the details. So Disney agrees to dismiss with prejudice their public records lawsuit against the district, with neither party admitting fault. This has to do with a lawsuit Disney filed in December over the state and district not fulfilling Disney's public records requests in a timely manner, which Disney alleged was against Florida's Public Records Act. Disney is not only dropping that lawsuit, but also agrees to withdraw their public records requests submitted to the governor and the district. So that state case has been dropped. Then we get into the acknowledgments and stipulations. Disney agrees not to challenge the district's determination that the district's 2032 comprehensive plan and the amendments to the district's land development regulations purportedly adopted in January and February of 2023 are now null and void, as are the developer agreement and the restrictive covenants. As you'll recall at the start of this video, I laid out how that King Charles document and the related restrictive covenants and land development regulations seem to be targeted at nullifying the authority of the new board, and that was the basis for the board's hostile actions against Disney in court. Disney now concedes those contracts are null and void, and even goes so far as to call them purportedly adopted. So even Disney seems to be saying, it was iffy if these were ever really in effect or valid or anything like that. So now that the district, the state, and finally here Disney have nullified that 11th hour developer agreement, it means the older development agreement, which reserved rights for the district and its board, is now back in effect. And more heartening, it looks like Disney and the district will be working together to amend the 2020 developer agreement to account for future development at the Walt Disney World Resort. Who would have thought we'd ever see these two parties work together? Could be some pretty good stuff here. Next, both parties agree to push to dismiss with prejudice the state lawsuit against each other. There's a section about labor services between the district and Reedy Creek Energy, their energy provider. Disney is given the long-term mitigation credits, which has been seen as a win for Disney here. Essentially what that means is that the credits the district has to develop undeveloped land on the property, move around protected swampland, things like this, Disney has the authority on all of those, which is an easy concession for the board to make if you think about it, considering that Disney owns virtually all of the land in the district. So who else would those go to? It definitely makes sense that these would go to Disney. Nevertheless, it gives Disney some greater assurances in terms of developing more areas, more undeveloped areas on the property for perhaps more hotels or even a fifth gate. so good news there. Next up, Disney agrees to seek permission from the court to defer briefing in Disney's pending federal appeal. So that First Amendment case that got thrown out and then Disney sought an appeal, Disney is not going to pursue that any further. And finally, Disney and the district released the claims against each other in each of these legal mumbo-jumbo, epic, several hundred-word run-on sentences, which I will leave for you to dissect and decode. It may mean that the district can't sue Disney for past criminal actions of the Reedy Creek Improvement District they find in the audit that they have been conducting for the past year. So that could be a major concession to Disney, which helped push this deal through. However, again, I am not a lawyer. This video is for entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as fact. Please review these documents for yourself. I cannot tell you conclusively what these giant paragraphs mean. Following the release of this historic settlement agreement, Walt Disney World President Jeff Volley released a statement saying, quote, "We are pleased to put an end to all litigation pending in state court in Florida between Disney and the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. This agreement opens a new chapter of constructive engagement with the new leadership of the district and serves the interests of all parties by enabling significant continued investment and the creation of thousands of direct and indirect jobs and economic opportunity in the state." Then Florida's governor, who has not been particularly charitable to Disney over these past 2 years, he held a press conference with a very different tone than those you'll recall from a year ago. It appears DeSantis is bullish on a 5th park coming to Walt Disney World and Disney coming up with attractions to rival Epic Universe. Listen to this.
We have an interest as a state in moving forward to make this region very strong. This tourism oversight board and that district is a big part of that. And I think that there's going to be ways where we can do things that are in the best interests of the state of Florida. And I think Disney can be a part of that. I mean, certainly you look at Universal, they're doing the Epic Universe. That's going to be a huge, huge game changer for this region. I got to think Disney would have an interest in maybe offering another one. The district will be ready to negotiate. So I think that there's a desire to move forward. I think that they have things that they probably have opportunities to do to expand their footprint, to continue to attract visitors. This area, of course, has always attracted a lot. I just think with the new Universal Park, I mean, I think it's just going to be a huge game changer. It's bigger than their other 2 parks combined. I mean, like, imagine that footprint. That's pretty huge. And so, I got to think that Disney would want to answer that to be able to kind of keep up with the competition. And I think that's a good thing for Florida, to have businesses competing against each other to offer more and more attractions for the tourists.
So now that you're up to date on the Reedy Creek CFTOD saga that we've seen unfold over the past 2 years, as far as my take on all of this goes, I think that this is a big win for those of us who want to see new investment in the parks. I think it's a win for the district in that I really don't think that the board wanted to be in endless legal battles with Disney. That bewildered look they all had when they found out about that development agreement that was pushed through, you can just tell that it's not the position they wanted to be in. There's been a lot of turnover in the years since, if you take a look at that board, and in the more recent federal opinion, it sounds like Disney could sue the board members for injury, so there's a possibility that that could have become a major fiasco for the board personally. Now those lawsuits are settled, the board has a say, they have their powers back. In another way, I think that this is a win for the state in that they got their state oversight of Reedy Creek, which I believe has been on their to-do list in the governor's office for decades, because Reedy Creek, it is a very, very special district. And I think for a long time, before this was totally politicized, there were a lot of people that felt, that Disney should not be able to solely control this special district. And it's not baseless when I say that they've wanted to do this for a long time, because I have heard indirectly from a former Reedy Creek board member that this was something that was on their radar, as well as Disney's, going back even a decade ago. And it seemed that a lot of folks thought that Disney was going to get the courts to revert everything back to pre-2023 Reedy Creek, back to business as usual, and it turns out that that has not been the outcome, at least thus far. It's still possible in the future if Democrats control the legislature. For example, one Democrat state senator has actually proposed a bill to remove state control of the district. And insofar as this being a win for the state, as the governor highlighted, if Disney feels their oversight district is primarily invested in fueling jobs and investment and growth in the area, that means Disney can grow, the state's tax base can grow, and the GDP in the state can grow. So there's that the rising tide raises all ships dynamic going on there, and now there is an oversight board in place not controlled by a private company, but rather by whomever the citizens of Florida democratically elect, both to the governor's office and also to the state senate, who confirms the appointments. Insofar as this being a win for Disney, think of it, Disney was engaged in multiple protracted legal battles projected to go on for years, and Disney is a publicly reporting company suing a state that has much more flexibility to fund lawsuits ad infinitum. So taking this one off the list of massive expenses will be good for Disney shareholders, and it means that promise of major investment coming to the parks that Disney CEO Bob Iger has been talking about, it can now finally be brought to Walt Disney World in a much less hostile regulatory environment. As I previously highlighted, this has been a win for lawyers because, oh boy, did they cash in on this. And as my final thought, I'm really happy that Disney and the district are working together because fundamentally, as someone who covers infrastructure development in this region, I want to see Disney invest in fixing their parks. I want to see them expand their parks, perhaps build a fifth gate down the road, as DeSantis alluded to. This could be a big win for us park guests, people who enjoy themed entertainment and want new things to look forward to enjoy in Central Florida. It's been universal this, universal that for years and years. So seeing this dispute, which could have gone on for years and years, come to a conclusion for the time being means perhaps we'll have some major infrastructure development to talk about at Walt Disney World sooner rather than later. Not ideas anymore, but actual projects. And this past month has been so exciting on that front with the shakeup at Imagineering resulting in a creative being put in charge who wants to create stuff. Disney filing permits for staging over at Disney's Animal Kingdom for the Dinoland overhaul we covered in our previous video. And as I've been teasing you guys about, there are further plans for both Disney's Animal Kingdom and the Magic Kingdom in the works right now, and the settlement increases the chances of those being greenlit. So it's a great day for us guests, and here's to hoping Disney and the district continue this more collaborative tone with each other the president of Walt Disney World calls a new chapter. There's big stuff coming, and I'll be right here to break it all down for you guys right here at Mickey Views in the months to come, and maybe I'll even be able to break to you guys some specifics on rumored D23 announcements. Maybe I'll make some rumors for you guys, and those will actually come a little earlier than the massive D23 event taking place this summer, where perhaps we'll see some of those confirmed. So be sure you're subscribed with those notifications on so you don't miss any of it right here. I hope you enjoyed this report. If you did, you can find out how to support us over at mickeyviews.com/support. Shout out to our patrons and executive producers over at patreon.com/mickeyviews. And if you'd like to get something in exchange for your support, you can also check out our merchandise store, link in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. From the Mickey Views Magic Studio, this is Brayden. Have a magical day.